Welcome to Awaken the Mind,
Relax.
the NLP and Hypnosis Guide, hosted by David Uhas.
You need to understand. If you can't, you must. And if
You're listening to Awaken the Mind, the NLP and Hypnosis Guide, a podcast that inspires the curious to the professional to discover meaningful content and pursue their passions. My name is David Uhas, and I'm a master NLP practitioner and hypnotist, best known for losing over 100 pounds and running 6 marathons in 2 years. And I'm sitting down with hypnotists, NLP practitioners, and coaches to talk about their process, the lessons they've learned, and how to make an impact in the lives of others. Our guest today is Patricia Ryan Madson. Patricia is the author of Improv Wisdom, Don't Prepare, Just Show Up, and a professor emerita from Stanford University, where she began teaching in 1977. In the drama department, she served as the head of the undergraduate acting division and developed the improvisation program. She founded and coached the Stanford Improvisers and taught beginning and advanced level courses in improvisation for undergraduate as well as adults in Stanford's continuing studies program. In 1998, she won the Lloyd W. Dinkelspiel Award for Outstanding Innovation in Undergraduate Education. In 1996, she founded the Creativity Initiative at Stanford and Interdisciplinary Alliance of Faculty who share the belief that creativity can be taught. She had the pleasure of teaching design improv for the School of Engineering, and she has been a guest lecturer for the Stanford Technology Ventures Program and for the Mayfield Fellows Program. Regularly, she is on the faculty at the Esalen Institute, and she has given workshops for the California Institute for Integral Studies, the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, the National Association of Drama Therapists, the Western Psychological Association, Duke University East Asian Studies Center, Wellness in the Workplace for BC University, the Meaningful Life Therapy Association in Japan, and for the Intrepid Foundation. Her corporate clients have included Google, Gap, Executive Leadership Team, the Lucille and David Packard Foundation, the Banff Center for Leadership, the National Collegiate Inventors and Innovators Alliance, Hewlett-Packard, Digital Impact, IDEO, the International Society for Performance Improvement, the Association for YMCA Professionals, Sun Microsystems Japan Division, Extempo Systems, Apple Computers, Adobe Systems, the Santa Fe Leadership Center, and Price Waterhouse. She is happiest when she is improvising in the classroom, helping to solve a problem or painting watercolor à plein air. I would like to read a poem that's in her book, and it is a poem written by Rumi. There are two kinds of intelligence. One acquired as a child in school memorizes facts and concepts from books and from what the teacher says, collecting information from the traditional sciences as well as from the new sciences. With such intelligence, you rise in the world. You get ranked ahead or behind others in regard to your competence in retaining information. You stroll with this intelligence in and out of fields of knowledge, getting always more marks on your preserving tablets. There is another kind of tablet, one already completed and preserved inside you, a spring overflowing its spring box, a freshness in the center of the chest. This other intelligence does not turn yellow or stagnate. It's fluid, and it doesn't move from outside to inside through the conduits of plumbing learning. The second knowing is a fountainhead from within you moving out. Please welcome Patricia Ryan Madson. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Patricia. How are you doing?
I'm well. I can see me. Wait, now I can see you. You've got the Golden Gate Bridge behind you.
You know, it's a beautiful view, and I can do that with the magic of Zoom and a green screen. I can change it to anything you like.
I'm delighted. It's one of the beautiful icons of where I live. So Thank you for that honor behind you. That's really nice.
Well, the honor is mine. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm always nervous about some parts of technology. I try to stay moderately informed about how these things work. And I'm truly delighted actually to learn this new system, because I'm guessing that it has a lot of uses, that you could have a number of people in the same room. It's good for meetings and stuff. Play improv games or something.
I'm hesitant to change and try new technology sometimes. And I kept hearing about this Zoom, like, well, why is it better? But then there's all these other cool things you can do with green screen. And like, as we're talking, you can set it up to where it switches back and forth. So if you were doing like improv games, it could switch to whoever has the mic.
Wonderful. Well, I haven't had that many video interviews. I'm pleased actually to see you, because I went on your webpage and looked at the great things you're doing, and have some idea of, as a coach, what you're up to and how you're helping folks. So yes. How can I help you?
The purpose of the podcast is to talk about hypnosis, NLP, and coaching. When I was in coaching, we all had to do a stretch so that we could empathize with, when we're with a client, when they're stretching, that the fears and all of that stuff. My stretch was stand-up comedy. It's, the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. And I read your book, and I got fascinated with improv and how that can help people. I don't know if it was in your book or where I read it. It talked about that the last frontier is ourselves, to be creative. I just love that. And that just so fits with the work that I do with coaching, because it's change work. And usually the problem, it isn't that there's no solutions, it's they just don't have the resources. And sometimes it's just a matter of being creative with their own thoughts. You know, so that's what I really love about, somebody who's stuck somewhere, horrible maybe, and that they can get creative and ask questions and get unstuck and move forward in life. That's how I was passionate about talking with you about improv.
Right. Well, I think improv, just the word, brings terror into most people's bodies and minds. Almost everybody I meet has some sort of response. Oh, improv! Oh, I could never do that. That's the scariest possible thing. I never know what to do unless I have a script. In fact, I think that's one of the real issues today with young people and texting and all. They really are frightened of general conversation and being able just to talk with someone without a script and a plan. They like to be able to control the situation. Improv is probably, it's a system whose time is coming into, his time has come.
Tell me about your growing up.
Oh, great question. Grew up in Richmond, Virginia, a Southern girl in a kind of ordinary middle-class family. My father was a used car salesman, my mother a housewife, and later she became a fashion model. And I was the kind of kid that played outdoors and knew all the neighbors in the area. I was the first one in my family to go to college. I went to West Hampton College, and I lived at home because we couldn't afford to put me in the dorms. But I loved being a college student. I was a philosophy major. Growing up, I was, what did I do in high school? I don't have a lot of memories of high school because I'm 75. All that's way back in the rear headlights or whatever, rear view mirror.
Did you do any acting or anything like that? Theater in high school?
That's kind of what started all this. In college, I started doing college theater. I just loved it. I was directing and acting at West Hampton College, University of Richmond. And when I finished, I went to graduate school in theater, which was a crazy thing to do because clearly it was not going to get me a job or anything like that. It wasn't that, but I was just having so much fun doing drama. 1 year into graduate school, I got a job offer to teach at a private Episcopal girls' school. So all of a sudden at age about 21, 22, I was the drama teacher at St. Catherine's School for Girls. And that sort of started my life. I found a career that I loved, which was teaching. I like teaching a lot better than acting or theater. Theater was, that's hard work actually. But something about teaching, which is a kind of acting, but it seems, if you're doing it well, it's more useful and more other-centric. And so taught acting. I did summer stock, Colorado Shakespeare Festival, and Nebraska Repertory Theater, and outdoor dramas, Unto These Hills, and stuff like that in my 20s and 30s. And then got lucky and got a teaching job at Stanford running the undergraduate acting program. And that's actually what brought me to improv, because I was an acting teacher, and the students at Stanford were great if you gave them a script, told them what you wanted, and kind of led them to the finish line. They could produce anything. But when you tried to find out what is it, how do you feel if you were in that character situation, there was a kind of deer in the headlights. I don't know what's the right answer. So I needed something to help actors access their own feelings and humanity and whatnot. And as is often the case, the teacher appears when you need it. And a crazy man named Keith Johnstone, who's a Canadian, well, he's actually British, but he's spent most of his life in Canada, came into the picture. He was assisting with teaching a class for my Tai Chi master. So, but improv then became the tool that I used to help the Stanford actors loosen up and find out what was going on. But the thing that surprised me was that while I was teaching it for the purpose of acting training, business kids and students in law and engineering said, wow, this stuff is helping us. We need to know how to think on our feet. We're kind of scared of what happens when you don't have a script. So improv began to expand as a way of helping people be themselves and step into an arena. Like we don't know where this conversation is going to go.
That's right.
And the thing that I tell my students is your life is your preparation for this moment. I mean, you don't have to add any. So right. It's not fair to say don't ever prepare. Actually, we prepare all the time. Prepare. But when you show up, when you press the Zoom button there, and all of a sudden there's this shining face looking at you, then you want to be there and live in that moment. I mean, I guess mindfulness is a big deal now.
I was getting very anxious the closer we got to doing this. And so to calm my nerves, I'm like, okay, I'll start preparing. I'll listen to the audiobook and I'll be ready. I'll be an expert. I saw a Google speech that you gave where you're like, I didn't prepare for this. I just showed up. So can you expand a little bit on that as far as there are key
maxims?
Yeah.
13 maxims. And one of them is don't prepare, just show up. And of course that's counterintuitive. We all are preparing all the time. That's what minds like to do. You can't really stop that part of yourself that is rehearsing or imagining or fearing what the future is going to be and how you're going to say it. In fact, I have to say that my nightmare is not improvising, but it's having to give a prepared speech. I was asked to do a TED Talk in New York, and I almost ended up in a mental institution trying to figure out how to prepare properly, because a prepared speech, there's an expectation that you have prepared and that it's coherent and you're not going to make any mistakes and all of that. I had coaches and all trying to help me. I'm the improv teacher, and I finally realized that what I needed to do was stand up and live my talk and improvise. So I did the speech every day a different way, and I was really ready to show up in New York. I was going to fly to New York to do the TED Talk down in the Village, and turns out that was the weekend of what was the big hurricane that wiped out Lower Manhattan, Katrina or something. Right. And all of a sudden the TED Talks and everything was canceled, and the trip was canceled. So I never got to actually do that. Preparing and executing has a lot of pitfalls, but improvising allows your mind to be able to kind of make sense out of where you're going. We all know how to answer a question, And I think in my book, I've got if you have to give a speech, instead of writing the speech out or making statement bullet points, ask yourself questions like, how did you get started doing this? Or what did people most fear about improv, or something? So that answering a question is a natural way that the mind can work. I found that if instead of following my notes or following preparation, I can prepare and think in advance all I want, run the scenarios of how it'll go and all the terrible things that can happen, because that's we often are self-critics. But if when the thing happens, when the interview starts or you show up in the classroom, you allow yourself to look around and really look at the faces of the people you're working with, rather than thinking about yourself and letting your eyes roll back in your head and wondering what they're thinking about me. It's discovering how to shift the focus off of self to other. And when we can do that, a lot of the stuff goes away. You're interested in the nice checked shirt that David's got on, and the Golden Gate Bridge behind him and the sunset and all that nice stuff. But we tend to forget to look outward when we're presenting, because we imagine everybody's looking at me and how am I doing? As I said, I've got the sunburn. Yesterday I sat outside at a church picnic with my daughter-in-law and didn't realize I didn't wear a sunscreen. So I looked like somebody whacked me in the face.
You look wonderful, by the way.
Thank you. I don't know. Vanity never goes away, I'm afraid. I'm interested in, of the maxims in the book, were there any that struck you or you found counterintuitive, or I'm not sure about that one, or, well, that hits the nail on the head?
The just showing up one, that's something that I've always preached with my kids. It's like, hey, just show up. I use that a lot in my coaching. Sometimes people are not wanting to get started and in some ways stop before they ever start. I took some improv classes in Indianapolis. And
cool.
They went over your maxims and always saying yes, and we had different exercises. When I did the improv class, one of the things that was so challenging, because I can get so analytical in my head and not get out of my head, that when I'm trying to overanalyze, you're on stage and doing a scene, I'm so worried about not doing it right and failing. But actually what they taught us was that if you fail, but fail beautifully, that the audience will love you if you're totally committed to that.
I mean, you're a superstar if you succeed, of course, and you're a superstar if you fail, but you're not beating yourself up. It's like, right. Oh, I screwed up.
Yes.
When I realized that as a teacher, that if I went into the class and I misspoke, or I forgot somebody's name, or I did something you'd consider to be stupid or a mistake, I could say, oh, notice I'm the teacher and I just did that stupid thing. And I kind of get points for surviving some terrible moment. And I like to be an example of screwing up in public, because until you really get a kind of okayness around that, it's hard. Life can be very hard if we all know that perfectionism is a great burden.
Yes.
So, but if you can accept yourself along with those warts and the sunburn and the bad haircut.
Yeah, I've got a bad haircut too. It's a little.
I like that though.
Thank you.
I really do. Yeah.
I'd like to hear more about your book. Of course, it's Improv Wisdom, a great book, and we'll put that in the podcast. There it is. And I love it.
Here it is. Yeah.
Yes.
I have to say, it's like a proud mother. I think of the book as my daughter, and she was born in 2005. That was the year it was published. And since then, it's been translated into 9 languages.
Oh, wow.
Really makes me happy. And I found out a couple of months ago that it's in 2 Chinese versions, one in Taiwanese complex Chinese characters, as well as the simple Chinese characters on the mainland. So there are 2 Chinese versions. And on Taiwan, there is a library for the visually impaired that has translated the Taiwanese version into Braille.
Oh.
And I'm just overwhelmed that some Chinese Braille person might be reading the book. Books are magic. They really are. She's my daughter, and she's moving around. And thank you for meeting her and letting her lead you to invite me to have this lovely conversation.
My pleasure, and I really appreciate you being here today. Where are some of the places that you have gone and given talks, or what are some of the interesting things that this book has led you to do?
Thank you for asking that. I like that. It's been really diverse. I've gotten invitations to give Dharma talks at Zen monasteries, a couple of those, one in Mountain View and in San Francisco. I've done some work I did that Google talk with Apple computers and Microsoft at one point. So some of the tech folks have invited me to come in. What I prefer is not to go and give a talk. And that's why the Google talk, I consider one of my great disasters, because I went on blah, 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 blah for an hour, and almost no one hangs in with that, because our attention spans are short. And so I wish, what I like doing, didn't finish that earlier sentence, what I like doing is working with a group, doing a workshop. So instead of talking about the value of attention or saying, yes, let's get on our feet and start doing that. Let's make up a story together, and you agree with the last thing I said and build on that story. So doing improv is really the only way to teach it. Talking about it is what we're used to. So if you go to Microsoft and they're a group of tech guys in their 20s sitting around with their hands in their pocket, kind of looking at their text messages, talking about what it means to work on the fly isn't nearly as much fun or as effective as getting some people to try to listen to each other and repeat back. A simple exercise I sometimes do is get a partner, and then I'll say, now I'm going to say go, and for the next 3 minutes, I want you to tell a story about your mother or your father. Pick one of your parents and tell something that memorable moment, or that something that drove you crazy about one of your parents. Go. Now, if you're listening, I want you to listen so that when we say stop, you can repeat back every word that the person said in the order. So I want you not just to give a summary of their talk, but to be able to have memorized it as you go and repeat it back. Okay, so go, and then we'll trade, and someone will talk and they'll listen. And we all realize, of course, that it's impossible. No one really does that well. So it's an example of not doing things perfectly, but giving a lot of attention to paying attention. And we don't listen for details very often in life, but improvisers need to, because, performing, if the characters are on stage and they talk about something that's happening or name someone Dr. Smith, then you come on stage, you need to know it was Dr. Smith. So a lot of what happens in an improv classroom is learning how to really pay attention to the details of the world that you're in, other people's conversations, or what seems to matter to them, because we're going to build on that rather than look in the rearview mirror.
Is that something that can be improved? I don't know if I've got attention deficit disorder. I'm self-diagnosing myself. But when you said that, I started having anxiety, thinking, oh my God, I got to repeat back what somebody said.
Well, of course, that anxiety is perfectly normal, because no one does that well. But if you try to do it, even for 2 or 3 minutes, and you realized, I don't really listen with much attention, you're likely, as doing the exercise, to do it better than if I just stopped right now and say, now repeat what I said the last 3 minutes ago. At least if you're trying to pay attention, you're already a step in the right direction. I suggest after we do that exercise and everybody says, no, I wasn't very good at that. Or the other thing that happens, when your partner actually succeeds at repeating back what you've said, it's amazing. You feel so honored and listened to, because everybody wants to be listened to. And that I'll say, okay, as an exercise, every day, pick some circumstance where it could be a program that you're watching on television or online. It could be a conversation with a friend or a spouse, or it could be in a lecture somewhere, and decide, now for the next little period of time, I'm going to really wipe away my inner monologue of all the things that I normally think about and just listen as if my life depended on it. And see what happens if you shift the attention from your own ramblings onto the speaker. Give it as much as of 100% as you can. Notice how your own experience of that speaker changes and how it's different for you. And in fact, you're trying it right now. I can tell.
Yes.
That there's a difference. It's such hard work that we can't do it very long. I call it real listening. And we can all get better at that, I think. And don't aim for perfection. I say aim to be average, but try that. Try to be more average with your shifting of self to other. I try to do this all the time with my husband because he's a genealogist, and the thing that he loves to talk about is genealogy and all of his research and whatnot. And I have to say, I am not at all interested. And I've tried for 10 years to become interested, and that has not happened. But what I can do is notice that I'm not listening to him, but I'm pretending, and actually take a breath and take it in. And when I really listen to what he's saying, even though I'm saying I'm not interested in that, something happens that is a good thing. Don't you think as a coach that one of the problems, or the fundamental problems under all the other problems, is that we're terribly self-absorbed? Of course, we all want to be liked by others. We want to be successful. And we're thinking about me, 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 me. And a lot of the way to gain that success and being liked is to shift the attention out onto them, you, the others. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I agree with that. I notice with listening, sometimes even trying to think about the next thing that I'm going to say instead of just being present with the person. I liked what you said about, even though you're not interested in the genealogy, you can authentically be real with his experience and what he's interested in. As a person, it feels good to be heard.
And I think we can grow our own. I almost think of it as a spiritual practice. Whenever I consciously set aside my little agenda in favor of really honoring someone else's words, that's a good thing. I'm practicing at that. That to me is a kind of a meditation.
In business, it sounds like improv is very beneficial with creativity, I'm guessing. And then also in personal relationships, What other benefits are there with practicing improv?
If you actually think about it, everyday life is an improvisation. So there's no realm in which it might not be helpful. Recently, I was giving some workshops for medical professionals, for doctors and nurses, trying to help them become better listeners and dealing with patients. There's a woman I know who specializes in teaching improv to first responders in a crisis, that working with emergency rescue teams and things, people that are constantly having to deal with the unexpected. Certainly, improvising doesn't give you new content. It doesn't make you come up with some magical new idea. I think improvising legitimizes using your natural intelligence, utilizing what you already have to solve a problem or to go forward. One of the things I tell my students is that you already have what you need. There's not some magical content or information or training or expertise somewhere down the line when you get to the end of your improv class. It's that improv training is about learning to trust your own natural intelligence right now. You've got what you need. Take a breath, use what comes to mind. And I think the thing that improv teaches is to not waste a lot of time trying to select the best idea, but it says take any idea that comes up or the idea that comes from someone else and use that and develop it. Once you're doing something or building on something, you're moving. You can learn more actually going in some direction to innovate, if you've started anywhere, then if you try to spend a lot of time getting the best idea, that's why you can start anywhere and start walking in the direction of a thought or a process. And I think it is that it's not a rarefied system. And that's why my book, when I wrote it, the publisher said, well, who's your market? Who's your audience? And I said, everybody. And that's, of course, the kiss of death. Yeah, no publisher wants a book for everybody, right? Because that means it's for nobody. They don't know how to market it. But it's turned out that it has been, because I get letters from school teachers and businessmen and doctors and priests and all kinds of folks, grandmothers. My son is interested in that improv thing, and he gave me your book, and gee, wow, that's good advice. I like that. Being positive and taking care of each other and just trying to do your duty. It's all good to me. So I think that, and my hope was in writing the book, was to appeal to not just a book for improvisers, but for sort of everyday life. We're all facing, I think, similar things where we want to be liked. We don't like making mistakes. We're often afraid of trying something. And saying yes to starting to develop the habit of yes, I think starts to create a mindset that can open some doors. I know it did for me. I'm often I've got a good reason why something can't work. I can block really easily. We have a rule in my house, since improv is kind of the modus operandi, that we basically, my husband and I, say yes to each other unless there's a compelling reason, medical or otherwise, not to, or something else on the calendar that we haven't paid attention to. So we try to be agreeable.
What are some other benefits medical industry related with? Is it anxiety that improv is beneficial for?
I think there's some actual studies now that anxiety is, I would say, it's a form of misplaced attention. It's a feeling that comes when your attention is self-focused and your mind's going on and on about the terrible things that probably will happen or why you won't succeed. You're running scenarios. And I think it's a normal part of life. The improv fix for that is to shift your attention. You can't actually be anxious and worrying when you're physically problem solving or trying to repeat back the thing that your partner just said to you, or if you're doing a word at a time story. That improv games thrust you into problem solving right in the immediate moment. And then doing that, you can look back and say, well, yeah, I was anxious before I did this. That exercise sounds hard. And I'm anxious now that we're thinking about it. But while I was doing it, it's hard for anxiety to hang on when you're actively engaged in your life. And so I don't know if you picked up through the book that one of my two teachers, I say I'm standing on the shoulders of two giants. One is Keith Johnstone, who is an improv teacher and guru who wrote the book Impro. And the other is a psychologist, David K. Reynolds, whose books are all about something that he has coined as constructive living. And constructive living comes from two Japanese psychotherapies, Morita therapy, which is basically about accepting your feelings, your anxiety, your fears, all of that stuff, and doing what needs to be done. It's a kind of a form of behaviorism that don't try to fix the feeling first. Don't try to get calm or have confidence. Do the thing you need to do first. Take that first step in writing the apology note or making the call for the job interview. And the idea of Morita therapy and of constructive living is know your purpose, accept your feelings, or accept the conditions of reality, including your anxiety and all the things that you can drum up that are wrong. Know your purpose, accept your feelings, accept reality, and then do what needs to be done. It's the emphasis on taking the actual first steps in the doing. And so I was a coach and a counselor too in constructive living, and people would come and they would have this or that issue and problem. And so they would leave with a homework assignment to do the first, we determine what's the first step you need to do that, and when are you going to do it. So we get real specific, and then homework would be doing the things that we need to do that we talk about. And there's a second part to the constructive living model that comes from a Japanese psychotherapy called Naikan, N-A-I-K-A-N. And Naikan is came from a Buddhist practice in Japan, in which you did an inventory of your life, noticing what you've received from other people and what you've given back to them, and also the trouble that you've caused them, which is a kind of a strange thing to think about. We often know a lot about the trouble other people cause us. Our mind likes to remember that, but we don't think about trouble we cause others, noticing what we're receiving from others. So it's another, I think it's something also that improv helps us with, noticing what's coming our way as a kind of a gift, and seeing everything that other people are doing for us, rather than just taking that for granted. Improvisers are less interested in the particular content of the story than they are in recognizing that we have now a storyline to work with. If my partner turns and says, "Nice dog you've got there," all of a sudden that is an offer that we can build the story on. Bad improvisers, as you know, would say, "That's not my dog, that's my wife." Ha ha. And we get a big laugh because we just blocked what happened.
I have a question about that. You're describing about saying yes and. So our listeners may not have experienced improv. Can you elaborate on that a little bit as far as what would it be like in a scene with two people where one person does one thing, like you said, "That's a nice dog that you have there." What is the responsibility on the second person?
Well, the responsibility on the second person is, first of all, to accept the premise of whatever it is. That is so, it's true. So yes, and then having accepted that, to add something that builds on it. So if I said, "Nice dog you've got there," what might you say?
Well, thank you. It's a Shitzu.
That's right. And I'd say, "A Shitzu? Oh my gosh, aren't they getting special attention in the dog contest that's coming up?"
Especially in Germany. They love them.
They do. So we're agreeing with each other. And in fact, let's play a game right now, a little simple one. This is, I call it Reminisce. And the premise is we've known each other a long time, and we've been to a lot of, done things together and whatnot. And we're going to create the story of something that we did together. And it'll start with one of us saying, "Remember that time," the other person, and then adding what was the event that we're going to reminisce about. And then we're going to go back and forth building on that story and see where it goes, because we're agreeing with each other and then adding a detail and trying to stay right in the moment of the last thing that was said, rather than trying to think ahead of where it will go. Got the idea?
I got the idea.
Yeah.
All right, I'm game.
Yeah. All right. Remember that time we went up to your uncle's cabin up in Northern California?
Yes, I remember that cabin well. It had the leaky roof.
Oh, and the weekend that we got there, it was raining like crazy. Do you remember that?
And we didn't have any umbrellas.
So the water was kind of leaking in on the side of the wall, and to stay warm, where you got something. How did we stay warm?
I went out in the woods and I got some wood for the fireplace, and you made some type of snack or something, I remember.
Yeah. I had brought some sloppy Joe mix and stuff. So once we got the heat going in the cabin, I made up this sloppy Joes and buns, and so we were able to, even though there was rain coming down the walls, we had this really kind of nice dinner around that toasty fire. Remember that?
I do. I remember that. And there was that old record player there, and it had your favorite song.
Yeah, that was, I used to love old Woody Guthrie music, and they had a couple of albums. And so we turned the record on, and I remember too, it was happening right as the sun was kind of going down, right over the, because that cabin was near the water. It's a lake or something there.
Yeah, it was. Wasn't there a bridge, a red bridge somewhere back there?
Absolutely. And when the rain stopped a little bit, we went out on that bridge to see the end of the sunset. I will never forget that night. It was so beautiful.
That was a wonderful evening.
Yeah.
And I remember there were crickets there too. Lots of crickets. You're really good at this.
Oh yeah, well I love it. I love to make up those stories. Someone was saying we would always do that exercise, and they said, you know, that memory that we just created was more vivid than almost any real memory that we could have. There's something really fun about being in a room with a stranger, but that we're going to agree. And we're not going to say, no, there wasn't, no, the bridge wasn't there, or that unless you recognize that our rule is to go along with each other, I think there's a natural human tendency to correct each other. Certainly, I'm fond of doing that to my husband. But if I think better, most of the time, it's bad habit, really is. And improv will remind you of how much fun it is to build on the idea that your partner just gave you. And so we're interested not just in coming up with interesting, innovative stuff, but we want to mine the idea that the partner just gave us. That's why yes and is a really positive principle. And it's more valuable than the principle that makes brainstorming work. In brainstorming, you're simply tolerant of all ideas and you kind of collect them. But there's no onus in the brainstorming process in having to treasure a thought that someone else in the room makes. But in improv, everything you say is gold, and I want to mine it and make you look good, and then we all look good and feel good.
Does that lead into gratitude? Is that kind of how gratitude is the thread in here?
I think so. It is for me, because when you really start to notice how much we receive from our partner, if we begin to see that and feel that, it can produce a sense of real appreciation and gratitude, and noticing, wow, we're in this together. The reason we can keep going forward is that my partner just handed me a little treasure. And so we notice these things as gifts rather than stepping back and assessing, I like that or I didn't like that. So we move out of the part of our mind that is judging all the time.
Yeah.
And the accepting mind then notices, wow, golly, we're able to have a really good time and tell a fun story without any effort. It's easy when you decide to build on your partner's ideas. I think we need this kind of training in the world that we're in, because increasingly all know that the polarization of our world means it's real easy to find what's wrong with the other person's idea. It doesn't matter what it is. A number of years ago, a journalist named Jesse Kornbluth, who was working for the New York Times, invited me to contribute to an ongoing set of articles that were, what would I do if I were president? And so the idea is not to ask political pundit types, but to ask writers or artists or whatnot. And so I think he wanted me to speak from the improv perspective when he said what I would do if I was president. So I said, I played into what I thought he wanted. I said, well, if I was president, I'd get both the chambers of the House and the Senate together, and the judiciary and the president, and we'd go on a weekend retreat where we had to say yes to each other and build on each other's ideas continually. We had to use the rule of yes and that was all that we could do. That would be that's what I would do if I were president. And of course, it was sort of done for the joke of it. Everybody, oh, yeah, good luck. But when you think about it, it's not the content that's the issue. It's that we are losing the capacity to listen and find the kernel of good in whatever is happening and work with it. Training in getting that yes muscle going and finding how we can build something, I think is really one of the 21st century skills that we all can benefit from.
When I went to college for electronics, and once I graduated, I was able to pass the tests to do specific exact things with electronics, but in the real world, you never know what you're going to run into. And maybe some schools already have this incorporated in their training. I would have liked to have seen more of, you have no idea what your problem is going to be. No one's going to have the same problem.
Right.
Okay, I just got to think on my feet as opposed to just memorize things.
It's great to have all that knowledge that comes from the training to be part of your base, to be part of the things that you have, your bag of tricks, your bag of understanding. It's wonderful.
So if somebody is interested in getting into improv, and I make up that they possibly will have some anxiety about it. I know I did.
Good.
They're in the right place, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What can you tell them to give them if they're wanting to join, like, let's say, but what's the class going to be like, or just tell them to show up?
Yeah. The first thing is to find a class in your area. And pretty much everywhere these days, certainly any major city and even smaller cities, has, I would check online to see improv groups, because if there's an improv group performing at some club somewhere, they likely will teach some classes too. Every improv group I know has to teach classes to try to pay the rent.
Right.
Because just performing never does that. So sometimes a college or university or a school, there might be some higher education school that is also offering a class. I would say if you're considering taking an improv class, do it. Show up. Shaking, etc., because that shows really good intelligence and good common sense if you're scared to take an improv class. But if you just show up, I can guarantee, I can't really guarantee, but the high probability is that an improv class is going to know that your coming there is filled with anxiety, and they're going to create a condition for you where you'll have a good time. And gee, what's the worst that can happen? If you're having a terrible time, you can run screaming out of the room, and that's okay too. But I've been teaching now, I'm 75, I've been teaching for 50 years. There's a good chance that if you show up at an improv class, you'll want to stay. They're places where you can be yourself. You don't need any special talent. In fact, you're better off coming with a really empty cup to see what can happen. And I've heard from a lot of people that taking that step, I think you've said this, that joining an improv class can change your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And very welcoming. They've got the class that I took, Comedy Sportz in Indianapolis. They had a lot of exercises where you start off with real simple warm-ups. Just little by little, you build confidence. And it was one of the greatest choices I ever made. But getting there, that was the hardest part.
I'm so glad to hear that, because I think more testimonials from people who were frightened at first, did it, and realized it has some enormous benefits that can only come because of the participation. That even with the best therapist or life counselor in the world, if you're sitting in a room talking about your issues and what you might do, it's not the same as kind of living with that anxiety or fear, showing up, getting your body there, trembling, and then playing some of those simple warm-up games, you realize I can do that. I can throw a ball or make a sound or hold my arms up and make a freeze and have someone identify what it is. The games are welcoming and fun and a little bit silly sometimes, and we can learn to get over ourselves, which is a great thing to do.
If someone wants to get a hold of you.
Well, right now I'm not, I would say that buying the book or the audiobook or the ebook is a good way to find out some of my ideas. I have a website, which is improvwisdom.com, the name of the book, improvwisdom.com, and it has a few resources, and there's an email address there that if you want to get in touch with me. In fact, my email actually is improvwisdom@gmail.com, and I always answer emails. So if any of your listeners want to ask me a question, there's something really liberating as you get older in life if you discover that you can say yes to a lot of stuff. You can try things, you can make mistakes, that this life is really precious and we get one of them. So if you can take that risk that improv might seem to be at first, a lot of doors can open up. And so I wish everybody well. My purpose in writing the book was to hope everybody would loosen up a little bit and try to improvise their lives.
Well, thank you so much for being on our show today. And thank you for your book. I highly recommend it to our listeners. And you inspired me to take improv classes. Thank you.
That's good.
And
thank you so much. I'm really honored, David. Yeah. Stay in touch.
Thank you for joining us today with Awaken the Mind.
Relax.
Hosted by David Juhas.
Awaken the mind. You need to understand. If you can't, you must. And if you must, you can. Now that I got you, let me put you in a trance. Got you feeling hypnotic. Your mind, let me massage it. Your thoughts are getting quiet. Your stress subsiding. You starting to see images, but it ain't no mirages. Think it's time to calibrate. Take a breath and concentrate. Get into your subconscious. Time to feel the energy, the brain waves. Let's go deep into your memory. Beware of self. Let the worries melt. All you see is you and you don't see no one else. Auditory, digital, talking to yourself. It might seem bizarre, a feeling you never felt. This is your time to shine. Awaken the mind, the NLP and hypnosis guide. Yeah.